Welcome back. This is the final week of Fantasy Central. This is your host, Zach, and I'm here with our very own fantasy football expert, the fantasy guru himself, Jeffe.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? If you're paying attention right now, then you're probably in the fantasy championship. So congratulations, and let's go get that dub.
Absolutely. Also, shout out to all of our WUBI Live Radio listeners as the Horsemen Pro Football Talk just finished up. Here you are, sticking around yet again with your boys to talk some fantasy football. For all of you not listening to WUBI, you can typically catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk and Fantasy Central back to back on WUBI Live Radio. However, as I previously mentioned, this is the final Fantasy Central show of the year. So after this week, for the rest of the season, you can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk with Brad, Jeffe, and myself on WUBI Live Radio. The app is available for free on your app store, or you can head over to WUBI.live for more information. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, simply listening on your favorite podcast platform, hit that like, share, subscribe button, help us out. One simple, quick gesture goes a very long way, and we very much appreciate it. So this is it. This is for all the marbles. Those of you lucky enough to be in your league's championship game, our hats off to you. Well done, and whether you come out victorious this weekend or not, keep your head held high. It's been a long, hard-fought season. We appreciate everything you guys have done for us. We appreciate you sticking around every single week. And of course, there are times that Jeffe and I haven't been correct in our predictions. That's normal. All the big network guys do it. Everybody does it. If we could hit every single time, we would absolutely demolish every high roller fantasy football league known to the planet. But that just doesn't happen. It's fantasy football. But we can honestly say that the vast majority of our predictions this year and the players we have discussed on this show hit that week. So we hope you took advantage of our advice, and we hope it served you very well. With that said, we have one more week to get into, so let's talk waiver wire first. Are you ready, Jeffe?
Yeah, let's get into it, man.
All right, the floor is all yours, sir. Who are you looking at on the final waiver wire of the season?
So this waiver wire isn't very flashy. It's not a whole lot of guys that you start with, a lot of confidence that you're going to get a bunch of points from them. But if you need somebody to fill in, whether it's COVID or injuries that are happening, the more COVID's this week, this past Monday than any other single day in the NFL so far. So you might need one of these guys. And the first one we're going to start with is a quarterback, and that's Trey Lance. Jimmy G going to be out at least one game. I could see it being the rest of the season with the injury that he has. We saw last year Drew Brees had the same injury, and he missed, 4 to 6 games, something like that. And so I expect Trey Lance to be the guy. He has the rushing ability. So if you need a guy that has some upside, I think Trey Lance can be that guy for you over this last week fantasy. Then coming down here, we're going to go to some running backs. It's going to be Boston Scott. Miles Sanders is out, and we've seen Boston Scott step up earlier in the season when that was the case. So I expect Boston Scott and even Jordan Howard is going to have some value. They might poach a touchdown from each other, one way or the other. But I think Boston Scott's going to be the guy here. So I would go and pick him up. Probably the biggest running back pickup of the week is going to be Dare Ogunbowale. Now, the issue with this one is that they play the Patriots, which is a tough defense. The Jaguars aren't a very good offense, but this past week, Dare, after James Robinson went out, had 15.2 fantasy points. So somebody that is going to have a lot of volume this upcoming week. Remember, Carlos Hyde also on the IR. So Dare Ogunbowale is about to have a big workload. And, if he falls into the end zone, you might have another 15-point day from an RB2 if you need it.
Fair enough. What do you think the Trey Lance's chances are up against the Houston Texans this week?
I keep going back and forth on this one. From what I've heard over the last month or so, Kyle Shanahan has seen Trey Lance be the guy in practice that they expected him to be when they drafted him. So I think as this year's gone on, Jimmy's been around. He's been learning from Kyle. I think he has a good chance to come out against Houston and have a really good game. Now, obviously, if COVID affects a team, that looks different. But I think with Deebo Samuel and George Kittle in the lineup, Trey Lance, with his rushing ability, also he should have more than enough opportunity and weapons on the field to be able to get the job done and have a good day against the Texans.
Yeah, I could see it. The two games that he started earlier in the season, week 4 and 5 against Seattle and Arizona, he ended up posting looks like 22 fantasy points against the Seahawks and about 15 against the Cardinals. Those are really the only two games that he was in there the bulk majority of the time because Jimmy G got hurt at that point. So I think even having the Cardinals at that time, their defense was absolutely killer, and they still managed to put up 15. So it's still a respectable low floor with Trey Lance, in my opinion. Going up against the Houston Texans, I think he could definitely have a higher ceiling than normal. So there is a chance, in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, he may end up eclipsing the 22-point mark he set way back in week 4 against the Seahawks.
Yeah, I could easily see that being the case. I wouldn't, you would expect a whole lot of option running in this game, a lot of RPO. I expect him to be able to throw for 1 or 2 touchdowns, maybe run a touchdown and have like 60 to 70 yards rushing. Should be a nice game for Trey Lance here.
All right. And the two running backs you talked about, Boston Scott, he filled in nicely for me for a couple weeks way back earlier in the season. I'm sure he can do it again. I think you're right with Jordan Howard, maybe possibly poaching a touchdown for him or vice versa. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the other guy's name. I'll leave that to you. Say his name one more time.
Dare Ogunbowale.
Is that how you say it?
That's how you say it.
Nice. Very well done. I'm iffy on him. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you know how that offense is. They're just not putting up the production. But I guess if you're in desperate need of a running back, he could potentially get a decent volume, which could always lead to fantasy points. That's how I see that one. So, okay. You have 3 wide receivers you want to talk about here.
Yeah, and a couple of these guys we mentioned last week, but the first one's going to be Robbie Anderson, back on the list again. He had another week, that Panthers offense isn't stellar, but he had 10.8. So again, if COVID is a bad issue for your fantasy team or whatever the case may be for this weekend and you really need somebody, Robbie Anderson has been getting double-digit fantasy points. He's, low ceiling at this point, but looking like more of a steady floor. So Robbie Anderson, it could be an option. Another one we talked about last week, he was out due to COVID, was Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He should be back for this game against the Vikings, and you can pass all over the Vikings. If you need somebody, I think the deep threat for Aaron Rodgers is going to be a nice pickup, somebody you can easily slide into a wide receiver 2 or flex option. And the last one here is going to be Isaiah McKenzie, who just went off, had 29.4 fantasy points against the Patriots, no less. That's a very good defense in the Patriots, and he stepped up. Beasley was out because of COVID. Gabriel Davis was out because of COVID, and Beasley should be back for this upcoming game. Davis, they're saying he might be back, but likely not to see Gabriel Davis. But I think Isaiah McKenzie earned himself a spot in that Bills passing offense, which they do a lot. And he, was reminding me of Tyree Kill on the field. I know that's a wild, comparison to make. Guy first good game against Tyree Kill has been doing a long time. But I think McKenzie can help some people win their leagues this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, he very well could, and I think he did definitely earn a spot, at least some repetition and some possible targets with an 11 reception, 125 yards, and a tutty up against the New England Patriots and Foxborough. And the Patriots are one of the better overall defenses in this league. So if you can put up those kind of points, which was the equivalent of about 30, 31 points, by the way, in fantasy, that's pretty damn good, man, especially when you got Stefan Diggs on your team and you're coming out looking like a number 1 wide receiver on the week. That's pretty fucking impressive. Did you mention him last week?
No, I didn't. I had Gabriel Davis
That's
as
right.
somebody that I liked, but he ended up getting COVID.
That's right. And in regards to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you have fucking Aaron Rodgers throwing you the ball. I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter what Packers receiver is. They have a super high fucking ceiling just because any one of those guys can pop off with 2 fucking touchdowns every single week, you know? It's just, yeah. So if Scantling's out there, man, and you need a receiver, it's probably a good route to go because Aaron Rodgers can get anybody that football. So, okay, that is it for the waiver wire. Let's move on to your top 10 running backs for the final week of fantasy football. As always, we're going to start here with number 10, and this list is a little bit different this week. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I had to change it up a little bit this week, but I think we're on to something this week. Number 10 here starting out is going to be Devin Singletary going up against Atlanta, who has a terrible defense, so 25th in terms of fantasy points given up to running backs. So Devin Singletary, who is taking command of that Buffalo offense. Now, I just said the Buffalo, the Bills, they pass a lot, and I understand that. But Singletary has been getting some passing game work, which you like to see in PPR leagues. That's very valuable for a running back. And he hasn't been doing bad on the ground. He's looked pretty good. Again, the opportunities to run the ball are far and few between for them, but he's been getting, upward of 15 to 20 carries per game the last couple. So I think Devin Singletary has a good week here against Atlanta, ends up as a number 10 back for week 17. Number 9 here is going to be one of Zach's favorites. It's Nick Chubb going up against the rival Pittsburgh Steelers. And we've seen the Steelers, especially over the last couple of weeks, getting gashed in the run game. They can't stop it. And Nick Chubb is going to have to be the answer. The Browns can't continue to lean on Baker Mayfield. I think they're seeing that. And, Pittsburgh can do what they want to try to stop Nick Chubb, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Nick Chubb has a good week here, even with Kareem Hunt possibly back in the lineup. I actually think that helps Nick Chubb a little bit, keeps him a little more fresh, and overall helps his value. So Nick Chubb comes in at 9 for week 17 for me. Number 8 here is going to be Joe Mixon going up against the Chiefs, who are 22nd in the NFL against running backs. And this is going to be a dogfight game, but Joe Mixon is going to have a good game for the Bengals to win. They've been a pretty balanced attack. I know this last game, Joe Burrow went crazy. That was kind of a send a message, tell the Ravens defensive coordinator to shut his mouth kind of thing. But I think Joe Mixon comes in, has a good game here. He's been involved in the pass game this year, which is a nice change up from what we saw last year. It's not heavy pass game usage, but enough to make a difference in his week-to-week value. And he's been running the ball great. 1,000-yard rusher, probably gets into the end zone here against Kansas City. So he comes in at number 8 this week for me.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised you have Devin Singletary up here, man. It seems like it's different. It's been different the last couple of weeks at least. But before that, we were talking about, man, the Bills just don't have a run game whatsoever. And then it's like the last few weeks, things have just slowly started to click and started to go. So I'm actually surprised you have him up here, but I'm not surprised if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, same thing. I mean, even when I was doing it, I didn't know who to put at 10 for the week. I was going from one down, and it just felt like Devin Singletary, with the way he's been used over the last few weeks, I think there's an opportunity for him to be good for somebody this week.
Heard that. Number 9, Nick Chubb, man. Like you said, he's one of my favorites. He's an absolute monster beast. This Browns offense is all about running the ball, and Nick Chubb is that ground and pound type back. They're going to make sure he gets the volume, and the Steelers' defense just isn't good. I expect Nick Chubb to have another big week this week against a divisional rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Joe Mixon has been one of the best running backs all season long. When he's been in there, he was out for a little bit because he was hurt and all that, but the Chiefs' run defense is not very good against running backs like you were talking about earlier. So Joe Mixon, I agree. He should definitely be up there, and he'll have another big game as well. So that puts us here at number 7, another guy who I've been very high on all season long when he was actually playing. He was out a few times, but that's here nor there. Here we are now, and that is number 7.
Yeah, number 7 here is going to be David Montgomery who has looked great since coming back from his injury. If he has a down game, you basically chalk it up to the fact that Matt Nagy's calling the plays. But he's been very solid, even against good opponents. And going up against the Giants here, I expect that streak to continue. I expect him to have a big game. The Bears should be up for pretty much this entire game, and they're going to lean on their guy and let him show out. I wouldn't be surprised if he carries the ball 30 times here, has like 150 yards and a tud. So David Montgomery comes in as the number 7 back for me this week. Number 6 here is going to be Dalvin Cook going up against the Green Bay Packers, who are, in terms of fantasy, they're 8th against running backs. And this Packers defense has been good, but the Packers give up the second worst yards per carry in the NFL this season. So I think Dalvin Cook, they're going to have to exploit that. You can't just keep throwing on Rasul Douglas. Like, he's basically shutting down the side of the field ever since he got signed by the Packers. So they're going to need to go to Dalvin in this game and hope that he can carry him to a win, and he gets the passing game work, which he's going to have to be involved in that in this game pretty heavily too. So I think Dalvin Cook has a nice week, comes in at 6 for me.
Yeah, I can't argue either one of those guys. Like I said, David Montgomery, absolute beast. I think he'll fare well against the New York Giants. And Dalvin Cook, he has consistently been one of the best running backs in the entire league in fantasy football the last 2-3 years. It's a tough matchup against the Packers, but he's going to get his volume. He's going to get his touchdown. He has the passing game upside, no doubt. He'll be up there, and he may even, before it's all said and done, slip into the top 5. I know you got him at number 6 here, but he possibly could get up there in the top 5. We'll see how that all plays out this weekend. But let's go ahead and move on to your top 5. Another guy who's in here almost every single week. I can't really say a whole lot bad about him. He's a stud even as a rookie.
Yeah, and that's going to be Najee Harris for the Steelers. And the only worry here is the fact that the Steelers' offense sucks. Their offensive line is terrible, and it's tough to create running lanes. And the Cleveland front 7 is very stout. So I thought about not putting him in the top 5 this week, thought about putting Dalvin Cook and switching them at 5 and 6. But he just gets so much volume. He's so much of their offense that he just had to be up here for me. Going up against Cleveland, if you listen to the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast this week, you heard me say that I think the Steelers are going to be able to win that game. They're going to be playing hard in this game to get Ben his last win in that stadium. Najee Harris is going to be a big part of that. He's going to have to be. He gets a lot of touches. I think he has another good week. Najee Harris comes in at 5 for me for Week 17. Number 4 is Austin Eckler, who was activated off of the COVID-19 list on Monday of this week. They go up against Denver, which is a tough matchup. But when they played Denver earlier in the year, Austin Eckler was quiet on the ground, but had 6 for 68 and a touchdown through the air. And he continuously stays involved in the pass game. I usually have him at number 2. He's still the number 2 overall running back for fantasy this year, but it's a tough matchup, so I slid him down a little bit, but still a top 5 finish here for Austin Eckler at number 4. Number 3, Deandre Swift. And this is assuming he comes back. It looks like he's going to be back for this game. He was questionable for the last game. They ended up holding him out. But it looks like he's going to be back here against Seattle from everything I've seen. And Seattle is not good against running backs. So I think DeAndre Swift coming back is going to have a huge day. It's going to be, hey, guys, don't forget about me when you're talking about the top 5 running backs in the NFL kind of day. So I think DeAndre Swift has a big effect for the Lions in this one, especially because I think they'll be down for most of this game. And he comes in at number 3 for me.
Yeah, no issue there. DeAndre Swift should have a monster game. The Seahawks are just complete dog shit. All facets of the game, offensively, defensively, absolutely horrendous. And that's going to be massively beneficial to DeAndre Swift. Even though the Lions offense just isn't very good, he is still a very capable playmaker. I think he will make those plays. Don't be surprised if the Lions squeak in there and get a win this week up against the Seattle Seahawks. And number 4, Austin Eckler. Number 5, Najee Harris. Both of those guys, absolute studs. They've proven their worth all season long. They can get it done against any opponent, and I think they will also do that this week against the Browns and the Broncos, respectively. So I agree with you on pretty much every single one you have here on this list. Number 2 is quite a surprise for me. I'll let you make your case on that one. But yeah, everybody so far I agree with should be in your top 10, just like you have them. So that leaves us with number 2 here, and I'll let you take it.
Yeah, number 2 this week, like you said, going to be a surprise for people, but I don't think it should be. It's Devontae Williams going up against the Chargers, and we've talked about this like every week. The dude who plays the Chargers is in the top 10 somewhere because the Chargers can't stop anybody. Dude, Rex Burkhead just looked like a superstar against the Chargers because they can't stop the run. And even getting Joey Bosa back in there, like he would have helped a little bit, but he's an edge rusher. He's decent in the run game, but nobody's worried about that. I think Javonte Williams comes in this game. The Broncos, they can't rely on Drew Lock. You can't rely on Drew Lock to win. So what do? You exploit what everybody else exploits. The Chargers run defense, and they run the ball as well whenever they decide to just run the ball 30 times in a game. The Broncos do it as well as anybody in the NFL. I think Javonte Williams has a big day. I think you see Melvin Gordon have a high yards per carry average in this game, maybe even a touchdown also. I thought about putting him in the top 10, but I think Javonte's better of them. He's the more explosive of them, and I think he's able to have a huge day here against the Chargers. So he's going to be my number 2 back for week 17. And number 1, you haven't heard the name yet. You can't be surprised. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor going up against the Raiders. And this pick is even more prevalent now that Carson Wentz is pretty much guaranteed, unless – okay, so I guess it should be noted. The NFL, if the NFL changes the policies from 10 days to the 5 days, Carson Wentz, even though the news came out on Tuesday that Carson Wentz was added to the list, the positive test was on Monday. So that would mean if they change it this week before the game, Carson theoretically could play as long as he's testing negative by Sunday. But even still, going up against the Raiders don't have a very good defense. They also have some people, all defensive players that tested positive on Monday were on the defensive side, a bunch of linebackers and defensive linemen. So JT should have another big game.
He should. I hope he does, especially being a Colts fan. Dude's done it all season long. He's an absolute stud. It's kind of a shame that Derrick Henry got injured this year because it would have been awesome to see them two kind of go at it head to head. I don't think JT would have been able to keep up with Derrick Henry just because, I mean, it's almost the end of the season. Henry's been out half the season and he's still like the 6th best running back in terms of yardage or something like that on the season. But it would have been interesting to see just how well JT could have kept up with Derrick Henry on the year,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, because, obviously Derrick Henry was getting so much more volume than Jonathan Taylor was getting. So he was getting more yards. But I would have liked to have seen, obviously Derrick Henry at this point would have been over 2,000 going into week 17 probably. He would have went away with the yards, but I think Jonathan Taylor having a better, yards per touch is pretty impressive too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's run down your top 10 real quick, summarize. If you want to start at number 10, go ahead, run them down.
All right, number 10 here is Devin Singletary going up against the Falcons. Number 9, Nick Chubb against the Steelers. Number 8, Joe Mixon against the Chiefs. Number 7 is David Montgomery against the Giants. Number 6 is Dalvin Cook in a divisional game against the Packers. Number 5 is Najee Harris coming back this week against Cleveland. Number 4, Austin Eckler going up against Denver. Number 3, Deandre Swift going up against Seattle. Number 2, Javonte Williams going up against the Chargers. And number 1 is the best back in football, Jonathan Taylor.
You're goddamn right he is. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Jeffe's final top 10 running backs in fantasy football for the 2001 fantasy football season. He's done pretty damn well with this list all season long. So, Jeffe, my hat's off to you, sir.
Thank you, man. A lot of time and research goes into figuring out who should be doing what week to week. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. With that said, let's transition over to Hefe's top 10 wide receivers. And as always, we will start with number 10.
Our number 10 here is going to be Brandon Cooks, who up until he missed the game because of COVID had come back alive for this team ever since Davis Mills took over for quarterback. We've seen Brandon Cooks being involved heavily as he should. He's really the best playmaker that they've had all season. And going up against San Francisco, you can throw deep on San Francisco. So I expect Brandon Cooks to have a nice day here. Davis Mills also to have a nice day here against San Francisco. Whether they win or not, don't know about that one. But I do think Brandon Cooks comes back off the COVID list and has a nice game against San Francisco. He comes in at number 10 for me this week. Number 9 is going to be Tyree Kill going up against Cincinnati, who has a pretty good defense. Now, they're 15th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers, but it's Tyree Kill. He's going to see a bunch of targets, and he has the speed to get away from anybody. And his point total has been pretty modest lately ever since they changed that offense to be more quick throw. We've seen, his yards per target go way down from where we're used to it. But he's still a playmaker. He's still great. Could easily get in the end zone here against Cincy. So he's a top 10 guy for me this week. Number 8 here is going to be Antonio Brown, who just saw 15 targets in this last game. Tom Brady only threw 30 of them. So I think Antonio Brown going up against the Jets is going to have a huge day. Obviously, Godwin done for the year. Mike Evans was questionable to come back, and then he got put on the COVID-19 list. So he is likely out for this game. So Antonio Brown should see a bunch of targets again and should have another big day.
He should, yeah. Brandon Cooks, you know how I feel about him. I had him on one of my squads this year. Currently, he is still listed as out. I anticipate that to change as the week goes on. We record this show a little bit earlier on the week than what you are hearing it currently. So I'd imagine by that time he will officially be back in the lineup on the fantasy boards. Right now, he's still listed as out, but no doubt if he is in there, which he should be, he should have a huge game. There was a time during the season when you and I discussed that it felt like Brandon Cooks checked out. He has since rebounded. He has gotten his shit together, and I think he had like a 30-point game the week prior to this last one when he was out with COVID. But I think he had a 30-point game, and before that was a 20-point game as well. So dude's been balling out all season. He's about the only thing that the Texans have. So I anticipate him to get the volume. I anticipate him to get the points. Same thing with Tyree Kill. The dude's a stud. He's been one of the best receivers in the league the last few years. He'll get his. And Antonio Brown, I would say if they're, with the exception of Brown sitting out for stupid-ass reasons this year, out of all the receivers in the entire league, the guy who probably brought you the most value for your fantasy draft pick would be Antonio Brown. He is averaging 20 fantasy points per game. I think that ranks him 5th overall in the entire league. And this dude was getting drafted way down below where he should have been getting drafted. So if you're lucky enough, like myself, to pick Antonio Brown up during the season, definitely paid dividends and then some. And I think he's going to continue to do that this week against the New York Jets. So I agree with you there. Any comment on any of those?
Well, I would just say that Cooper Kupp was drafted pretty low in drafts compared to what he's done. So
solid point.
Yeah, so I put Cooper Kupp there, but yeah, Antonio Brown, for when he's been there, he's been crucial.
Solid point. I can't argue that. All right, moving on. Number 7.
All right, number 7 here is going to be a Rams receiver not named Cooper Kupp. It's going to be Odell Beckham Jr. And last week I had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both in the top 10 going up against Baltimore. And that ended up paying off. All 3 receivers had really good games for the Bengals in that game. I think that's going to be much of the same here going up against Baltimore. Stafford's about to have a huge day. I think he's going to have 400-plus yards and 4 touchdowns. Odell Beckham Jr. is going to get another touchdown for the Rams and just continue to prove that Baker just doesn't know how to play quarterback, because obviously Odell Beckham Jr. has not lost it. I expect him to be a top 10 wide receiver this week. Going up against a poor secondary, so he comes in at 7 for me. Number 6 here is going to be Stefan Diggs going up against Atlanta, who again has a terrible defense. And with the wide receiver situation being the way it is, and some guys not practicing a whole lot, and obviously Isaiah McKenzie might come in, steal some targets, but I think either way, going up against a poor defense here, Stefan Diggs could have a tough day. The only thing that worries me about this is the fact that AJ Terrell has been so much better this year than he was last year. He's actually been one of the best corners in the NFL. It's just a supporting cast around him on that defense is absolute garbage. So maybe Stefan Diggs stays quiet, but Stefan Diggs, in an offensive-driven league, tie goes to the receiver. So Stefan Diggs, I think, has another great week for them, and they get a dub. He comes in at 6.
Yeah, he should. Overall in the season, Diggs, he's still in the top 10 overall in the best receivers for fantasy football. He's still averaging, I think, like 17 fantasy points a game. He's only had 2 single-digit games this week, but it's kind of been a little disappointing. I had him in one of the leagues, I think. I don't think I had him in both. I think it was just one. But it's kind of been disappointing. He wasn't as explosive, it seems, like he was last year, but he's still capable of producing those. He's still getting his points, whether it be off points per reception or yardage or even putting up a touchdown. He only had one game, and that was against the Colts, where he had 2 touchdowns this entire season. So it's kind of been a little disappointing, in my opinion, with Stefan Diggs this year, but with the way Josh Allen is spreading the ball to other receivers like Gabriel Davis or Isaiah McKenzie, I can definitely see why he hasn't seemed as flashy this season. But he's still, like I said, he's still putting up the points. He's still averaging 17 points per game, and I think he was ranked number 7 in the last standings that I looked in terms of best receivers in fantasy football this year. So I could definitely see him. I think he will get a top 10. He should have I want to see him put up one huge game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what you keep waiting for. And here against the Falcons seems like the perfect opportunity for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to hit on Odell Beckham, I've never really been high on Odell Beckham, but I will admit that since he has gone with the Rams and Robert Woods went out, Odell Beckham has filled in nicely. And granted, that's because teams are paying a lot more attention to Cooper Kupp, who's the best receiver this year. But Odell Beckham has showed up and he's actually produced. So well deserved of him being in your top 10. That's all I got to say about that, really. All right, let's move on. Number 5.
All right, starting off the top 5 here is going to be Jalen Waddle going up against Tennessee, who has a poor secondary, and they're good at stopping the run. So what do I think the Dolphins are going to do? They do what they always do. They're going to pass the ball a lot in this game. And Jalen Waddle, I believe, is at 95 catches after the Monday Night Football game. He is that would make him 6 away from tying Anquan Bolden's single-season receptions record, 7 away, or and 7 away from breaking it. So I think Jalen Waddle comes in, has another big game for the Dolphins. If they have any hope of winning, they're going to need him to come up in a big spot for them. So I think he has, another, 8, 9, maybe even 10 catches in this game, over 100 yards, and helps the Dolphins at least try to win this game. Comes in at number 5 for me. That's Jalen Waddle. Number 4 is going to be the Jet, Justin Jefferson, going up against Green Bay. This is another, if they want to win, they got to go to their superstar. Adam Thielen is out. KJ Osborne is in. And so Justin Jefferson should see probably somewhere between 12 and 16 targets if I had to guess in this game. It's going to be tough. The Packers have a good secondary. Obviously, you got to worry about Rasul Douglas catching interceptions back there. But I think Justin Jefferson still is one of the best talents in the NFL, should have another good week. He comes in at 4. Number 3 is going to be Deebo Samuel going up against Houston. And it's going to be, one of those things where the stars on the team have to help this rookie quarterback. And I think Deebo Samuel is going to have a heavy hand in that. Right now, Elijah Mitchell is still questionable to come back, still pretty unclear, and I don't think Jeff Wilson Jr. is a guy that they want to continue to lean on, so I would see a lot of Deebo Samuel in the backfield in this game, and also spread out to wide receiver, obviously, so I think he gets a bunch of touches here and gets into the end zone probably twice in this game against Houston's, and he's going to be my number 3 receiver in Week 17.
Could definitely see it happening. These 3 guys, the up-and-coming young superstar wide receivers for the NFL. That's Jalen Waddle, Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel. All three of them have been balling out all season long. They have very favorable matchups this week, with the exception of Jefferson. The Green Bay Packers defense is a little bit tougher, but Jefferson is that kind of caliber player where he's still going to get his. And Kirk Cousins, although the Vikings haven't won a whole lot of games this year, he's still been a pretty decent quarterback. So I think he will get Jefferson the ball in this matchup with the Packers, because if you want any chance to beat the Pack, you got to give the ball to your guys like Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook. That's a key to success, in my opinion, against the Green Bay Packers. And Deebo Samuel, top 3 receiver all season long. No doubt he should be there, sitting at number 3, which happens to fall behind the 2 guys you are getting ready to discuss right now, who are on a completely different level than everybody else in this league, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's why these last 2, they're just here every week. They're on a different level. That's a great way to describe it. Number 2 is, of course, going to be Devontae Adams, going up against Minnesota, who has a terrible secondary. Doesn't matter if they were the best secondary in the league. No. Why? Because he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball, and his name is Devontae fucking Adams, dude. Like, you can't stop him. He's going to be one of the best receivers week in, week out, until, for the foreseeable future. So Devontae Adams is my number 2 this week, and my obvious number 1 is the other Rams receiver that we love to talk about. That's Cooper Kupp going up against Baltimore. Cooper Kupp is probably going to have all 400 of Matt Stafford's yards and all 4 touchdowns. He's going to absolutely slaughter this Baltimore defense. So expect Cooper Kupp. Realistically, I see him getting 35 points in this game.
Oh, no doubt it can happen. I'm sitting here looking at the overall stats on Devontae Adams right now for the season. He has 4 30-point games, 1 40-point game. Didn't hit single digits all season long. He missed 1 game early in the season against the Cardinals. He's currently ranked the number 2 wide receiver with an average of 22.7 points per game. Dude's an absolute stud. And this is kind of off topic of fantasy football, but if this thing with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers doesn't work out like everybody hopes that it's going to work out, the Packers are going to lose Devontae Adams too. And that losing those 2 guys, arguably the best quarterback in the league and the best receiver in the league, that's shit that'll make your entire organization hurt for the next decade,
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they go team up somewhere, someplace that has a bunch of cap space, and they go on and compete for a championship or win a championship. That would haunt Packers fans forever, as they have Jordan Love starting for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But regardless, that's not going to happen this week, because he is absolutely going to demolish the Minnesota Vikings, who are 32nd against wide receivers in the league. So look for Devontae Adams to have yet another huge game. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. The dude is the best receiver in terms of fantasy football this year, averaging over 27 points per game. Let's see how many 30-point games he's put up so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 30 bangers, and no double-digit games all season long. That is fucking amazing.
Yeah, and that mark, he got over 27. He is currently having, and probably will finish with, the best fantasy season that anybody has ever had, breaking Jerry Rice's record.
That's absolutely crazy, but good for him, man. He definitely came into his own this year, and he's absolute stud. And it's been a joy to watch him all season long.
Yeah, seriously, he's somebody that I've been picking in fantasy drafts for the last couple of years in one of those later rounds. People just overlook him. They were talking about Robert Woods, and I loved having him on my team. It was like 2 picks before I went this year. I was about to pick him up in the league that I care about, and my buddy Storm, he took Cooper Kupp, and he's in the fantasy championship because of Cooper Kupp. So.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, I was like, I know exactly who you were getting ready to talk about, because it seems like every guy I was looking at in my drafts, right there was Storm right before me to snag him up.
Yeah, seriously, he took like 4 of the draft picks that I was going to take and got him right before I could. And now he's in the championship because of it.
Well, good for him. He was in the right place, right time, I guess.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, that's all we have for you this week and this fantasy football season. We appreciate you all tuning in all season long, and hopefully Jeffe and I were able to provide you with some insight to help get you an advantage in your fantasy league. As always, special shout out to all of our WUBI Live listeners for tuning in. You can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast on WUBI Live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time from now until the end of the season. The WUBI Live app is available for download in your app store, or just simply visit WUBI.live where you can stream over your internet browser. Is there anything you want to say before we part ways for the final time this season, Jeffe?
Yeah, man, it's been a good season. Some leagues do good, some leagues not so well. But it's been a fun ride. It feels like it went really fast this season. I felt like we had just gotten started doing this, and here we are at the end of the season. So it's been fun. We'll be back next year. Over the off season, keep in touch. Keep looking on the on the YouTube page and on the social medias. We'll come up with some stuff to do in the off season, talking about some fantasy football. So go win your championship, and we'll see you next year.
Absolutely. You know what they say, time flies when you have fun. And really, I've enjoyed it this season.
Yep. That's how I feel every single week. There hasn't been a whole lot of free time while football season's going on. But it's been a blast. Like you said, when you're having fun, time flies. And again, it feels like yesterday we were starting the division debates, and we're already here, week 17.
Yeah, this is our second year doing this. The first year was during the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We were just starting out, knew absolutely nothing. This season, we really wanted to focus on our viewership and getting people involved, and I feel like we have done that. Next year, our focus is going to be on content quality and bringing you guys the absolute best product we possibly can. And we hope to get some of you guys who have listened to us the last 2 years on the show. We'd love to have you talk some fantasy football, pick your brain, get some different opinion on things. That'd be absolutely awesome if you could do that. So again, thank you all for being with us every single week this season. We look forward to next season, which is season 3 for us. Good luck to you all this weekend. For Jeffe, I am Zach. We will see you right back here in late August for the 2022 NFL Fantasy Central Draft Show. Take care.